So could you just start by telling me your full name?
My full name is Timothy Lee Paris.
Perfect.
P-A-R-I-S, like Paris, France.
Yes. And where and when were you born?
I was born close to where we're at right now. It was Parkview Hospital in January 16th, 1953.
Okay. And is your family from around here as well?
Yes, both my parents are from this area.
Okay. And do you know how, does your lineage here in Rocky Mount extend farther back than your parents?
Well, I know that my great-great-grandfather left a farm in Wilson County and came to work in Rocky Mount Mills in the 1890s.
Okay.
I'm not really familiar too much with my mother's side of the family, except that they're from Florida, way back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how far back, but that's about all I know about that.
Okay. And you're just talking about your great-great-grandfather and how he worked at the mills?
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about your family members who have worked at the mills?
Well, everybody did.
Mm-hmm.
It started with my great-great-grandfather and his son. He had 8 children working at the mill at one time. And my grandfather was Ambrose Paris. He went to work when he was 10 years old. And I don't know exactly what he did. He went through several programs during his time there, and they sent him to school to learn different things. He ended up being a shift foreman until he had an accident. I want to say it was 1942 or 43, and he's the only fatality in the history of the mill, and I was told that by Tom Battle, who was one of the owners of the mill.
Wow.
It's been in his family since conception, anyway. And then my father worked at the mill. He was actually working with a bread company during World War II when he was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And when my grandfather passed away, in order to live on the mill village, someone in the family had to work in the mill. And my aunt and my uncle, they were both already in the military. And somebody had to step in. My grandmother was actually pregnant with the last of 9 children when grandfather died. And then Daddy went to work there. And then he met my mom, who worked there, and I think her mother had worked there before her. And they got married, and I worked at Rocky Mount Mills. My older brother worked at Rocky Mount Mills. My oldest daughter worked at Rocky Mount Mills until she found out that she was allergic to cotton. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Tell them how Grandma and Honey met.
You wanted to hear that? Okay, that's very interesting. When my dad came back from the military, he was drafted during, he was working at the mill, he got drafted, he went off. I think he got drafted. No, I'm wrong, he didn't get drafted. That was my uncle before him. My father, who was a small man, he went and tried to volunteer. They would send him home. And finally my grandmother signed for him to join the military when he was 17. That's what happened. And so he goes off in the military. He was in the Army Air Corps. He came home and he saw my mother. And he told the guy that was with my mother, he said, "I'm going to marry that girl." Never spoke to her. And the guy said if he had bought somewhere in Europe a set of an engagement ring and a wedding ring. And he said, if you can talk, he said, you don't know her. She don't talk to anybody. She won't have anything to do with you. He said, if you can even get a date with her, I'll give you these rings. 40 days later, my mom and dad got married.
Wow.
So chewing gum.
Oh yeah, it was, my mama was talking to one guy that worked where she's going to be working.
Yeah.
And it's called the card room upstairs, and he used to drop a piece of Wrigley's chewing gum down by this pipe. And in World War II, getting sugar was impossible. So chewing gum was extremely rare. And I told him my dad's a real small guy. This guy's a real big guy. And Daddy found out about it, and he went upstairs and had a talk with the guy. And he says, look, if she needs any chewing gum, I will be sure she gets it. You stay away from it anyway. And he said some words that you probably would not hear at revival. So anyway, and I think that might be what really turned the tide for my mother, for him standing up like that. But anyway, I'm thankful that they got together.
Yes.
And that was it. Their first date, I can tell you their first date, we went to the Carolina Theater, which is uptown Rocky Mountain. They saw a movie. I used to know the name of it. I can't remember now. And Daddy said, if you'll give me your hand, I'll hold it. And that to Mama was another step forward. And then they were married. They had 3 children. Daddy worked at Rocky Mountain Mills until he retired. So did my mom. They lived on the Mill Village from 1955 until what was it? Till 2000. Yeah, 2001. That's right. We had bought them a house, and and I remodeled it for them. That's what I do. I'm a contractor, remodeling contractor, and moved them into the house. It's not far. Daddy could stand in the backyard and throw a rock to where he was born.
Mm-hmm.
He was born on number 2 Spring Street in 1928.
And what were your parents' names?
Doris Williams Paris was my mother, and
Mhm.
James Kermit Paris was my father. Kermit's kind of unusual name.
Yeah.
He got that from my grandfather, who was kind of a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
And Teddy Roosevelt had a son named Kermit. And that's how my dad got his middle name, Kermit.
Yeah.
And then my brother worked in the mill. He worked in the twister room. I worked down there in the spinning room.
Mm-hmm.
And what else you want to know?
Well, so your family lived in the Mill Village for a long
Yes,
time?
we moved there when I was 2 years old.
Okay.
We moved to 15 Car Street in 1955. And then I stayed there until I was married. And then my parents in 1980 or 81, 83, okay, in 83, they moved to 11 Car Street, 2 houses down, because that house had an extra room on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I did that house before they moved in.
What was that like growing up in the Mill Village?
Well, it was really wonderful. I mean, everybody knew everybody. What you did, you sat on the porch and talked about whatever was going on at the time, you know, politics, religion, what happened at the mill, if the mill was going on short time because of some this or that, and a lot of fishing went on, and drank coffee, rocking a rocking chair. And my dad said that, I remember when we got an air conditioner, he said that's going to ruin everything because everybody will go inside and close the door. And it did, it changed communication. But I grew up down there and we had the river. We used to play in the river, we used to fish in the river, we used to trap muskrats in the river, and there's an island down there. We used to play, it's kind of like Tom Sawyer kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We had these swings and trees and we would swing out and go swimming in the summertime and stuff. There was a pool not far from there, a public swimming pool,
Mm-hmm.
but we preferred the river. It was more adventuresome. And we had boats, we paddled all around, and rafts, all that sort of stuff that little boys, young boys do.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And then when I was 11, it was this group came over here from England. You may have heard of them. They were called the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed my life, and I wanted to be a musician. And so my dad got me a guitar. I started learning to play, and down here where this brew mill is called the Koi Pond,
Mm-hmm.
a good friend of mine lived down there named Donnie Skinner, and we formed a band and played. And then last year, now I'm older, I get together with some good friends of mine on Thursday nights, about twice a month, and we play music. And some guys get together and play cards. I couldn't afford a Corvette to relive my youth, so we play music. And we've gotten right good at it, and so now we've been playing different places. And last year kind of made a circle for me, because we played at the Koi Pond last August. And it was just wild, because that's where I learned to play.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of surreal in a way.
Yeah.
But it was fun, you know, and we may do it again, who knows.
Yeah. Someone was just telling me earlier that they played at the Koi Pond too.
Who's that?
Who was it? It was...
There's a lot of people play down there by now.
Phil.
Phil Batchelor?
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's my good buddy. He's a carpenter friend of mine. I'm a building contractor, you know, remodeling contractor, so we run into each other from time to time. We were friends. We used to actually play in a band together
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, as they say.
What was your band called? Do you remember?
No, this band is called Paris West Band that I'm playing with now. The one that Phil and I played with, this has been so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember.
Yeah.
We were a cover band,
Mm-hmm.
you know. We never really, we used to play, when I started I was 12 years old, and we used to play birthday parties.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't play, we used to play for the Heart Fund and different things. We played a lot, but we couldn't play where it was alcohol and stuff. We couldn't play clubs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
Yeah.
all these outdoor events and charity events, things like that. It's a lot of fun.
So your oldest daughter worked at the mill when it was closing, or when it closed?
But not long before, yeah.
Okay, and
But-
were you working there at that time too?
Oh, no, I was, I worked there from like 69 to 73,
Okay.
I think it was, or maybe 74.
Mm-hmm.
I was a dolpher, worked in the same department that my parents worked in. My mother was a spinner. My daddy started as a dolpher, ended up being a fixer, then an overhauler, then he was really good at mechanics, and he became a machinist. Used to make gears and parts for frames and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Great. And when the mill closed, what was, because you grew up here, what was kind of the difference you saw between when the mill was opened versus what happened afterwards?
Well, but I can't remember, about 600 people didn't have a job anymore.
Mhm.
And my dad had retired, and he was 62 when he retired, and he went back to work at the mill. It was kind of a pseudo night watchman.
Mm-hmm.
And they rented the warehouses to trucking companies, and they stored stuff in them, so trucks would come in and out. Daddy would let them in and out the gate. He had this little guardhouse, and he'd sit in there, and then later he was like a night watchman, and he'd have one of those clocks that you put the key in. You have to go to all these different stations, and he used to do that, and he did that for years after the mill was closed.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, my son used to ride his bicycle in what was the spinning room where I used to work when all the machinery had been taken.
Yeah.
Remember that? He's my youngest. He's
Mhm.
only 25, but it was sad. It was really sad,
Mm-hmm.
because that's part of Rocky Mountain. That's a big part of what created this town.
Yeah.
Cotton, tobacco, and the trains.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, right up the road here, was just warehouse after warehouse after warehouse of tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big, big deal.
Yeah.
But
Great. I don't know that I have any other questions, but do you have any other memories or stories or anything?
I got
that
all
you'd like
kinds
to
of
share?
memories, but I don't know, they'd probably be boring. It's just, family stuff, that we did. I can't think of anything really significant, or traumatic or anything like that happened that would be, like exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't think of anything like that. It was great growing up there. It was, like I said, it was isolated. It was kind of like, it was just the way, and everybody knew everybody, and people, it was just different. People communicated differently, and there's no cell phones and stuff like that. For instance, you ever heard of a party line?
No. Oh, yes, when
Okay.
multiple people.
Yeah, that's what we had, a party line, and it was 2 other people on the same line, so it was not uncommon to pick the phone up and somebody be talking. You could just listen to their conversation if you wanted to. A lot of eavesdropping went on between the ladies, I can tell you that. I know my mother did her share, so things like that. And of course, there was no cell phones or anything. And you walked everywhere you went. On just about every corner, somebody on their back porch had a little store.
Mm-hmm.
Usually an older lady or older couple, right down the street from my house, we used to go down and buy Pepsis, Cokes, candy bars, penny candy, stuff like that. And that was Miss Bass's store. Then the lady that was my babysitter when I was growing up at the end of East Elm Street, she had one of those little stores. And then Miss Coley had a store on River Drive. And I think Miss Taylor had a store on Falls Road.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where wasn't like a grocery store or anything, but if you needed something like a BC powder or some aspirin, or if you just wanted a cold drink, that's where you went.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was this little Falls Road area, where Booney's down here is, and all those, they were grocery stores and stuff down there, and that's where we went. I used to actually deliver groceries on a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting. I'd go pick up a bag, it would be a whole lot, and take it to some lady's house, and she would put the money in an envelope, and I'd take it back and give it to Mr. Caps. He would count the money and say, well, she left you a nickel or a dime
Mm-hmm.
for little tips, things like that.
Yeah.
But, Do you think anything?
No, I mean, I don't know if you want to mention like more about your family history. I was trying to think of anything.
Well, my dad,
What happened to Ambrose? You didn't tell her kind of what happened to Ambrose.
well, my grandfather was electrocuted. What happened is it was not uncommon in the card room where she's going to be working, because of the machinery, it caused friction, they'd have a fire. And the sprinklers would come on, put the fire out, where the water would run through the floor, that's upstairs, and drip through the floor into the spinning room below sometimes and cause damage. And at this particular place, it formed a puddle of water behind a frame. My dad used to know what frame was. My grandfather was a shift foreman, and part of his job at the end of each shift, he had a little book thing, and he would take up the hanks. On each frame there's a little clock, it's called a hank clock. And a hank is a certain length of yarn, I don't know how long it is, but and each frame would produce so many hanks, so they kept up with that, how much they were producing. And the frame had gotten wet and it made it cut off, and there was some shortage below the mill. And so when he reached up and grabbed the switch to turn the frame back on, it got it. And he laid in the hospital quite a long time.
14 months.
Something like that.
Oh.
Here
And-
at Parkview, yeah.
Right here, about where we were at, Parkview Hospital, until he passed away. That's why my dad had to go to work in the mill. And it was kind of strange, because my other grandfather, he worked at the mill too, my mother's dad, and he worked in the shop. And he had examined the frame and knew it was something wrong with it. And he went to the shop to get a sign. They would hang a sign on it. You know, I don't know what the sign said, but it was basically, don't mess with this frame.
Yeah.
You know? And while he was going to get the sign is when the accident happened.
Oh.
Weird.
Mhm.
But like I say, he's the only fatality according to Tom Battle. And he told me that at right after my father's funeral. He came back to the house, to my mother's house, and we sat there and talked for a long time about, he told a lot of history. I mean, I wish he was still around, because he knew it. I don't know what of them became of all the records. They used to have some really good records down there, pictures, archives, whatever. And I don't know what became of all of it. Think anything else?
No, I mean, grandparents were married 52 years.
Oh yeah, more than that. They got married in 1947, and Dad died in 2006, 2005. So that's how long that is. They were married. I mean, that was like the Bible says, two people become one. That's true. Because my mama could look at my dad, he'd get up and cut the grass. He didn't say a word. She just look at him. He'd get up. Remember? Is that not? And then he would, Daddy would look at Mom. She'd fix him a bowl of ice cream. But it was a great love affair. I mean, really, they loved each other from day one until my dad passed away. They had their ups and downs like every couple does, but I mean, that was very interesting.
Good people.
Yeah, they were great people, really. Dad would do anything for you. His favorite thing to do was catch bass. He was a bass fisherman. And he was the man around town at that time, because during World War II, when he had that bread route, he traveled down toward, not to the coast, but down that way. And he would deliver all these Blackwater creeks, or deliver bread to places like Hereford. It would really be out in the country around these areas. And he got to know the people, because he did it for a long time. And those people remembered him, and they would tell him where all the sweet spots were. You know, they would fix hurdles and stuff where, you know, where fish would accumulate, and they would tell Daddy. Later on, when he's a grown man going back down there with his buddies fishing, they would tell him where to go. And so he knew all those spots, so everybody, Daddy came back with the fish, and all the guys that wanted to catch fish would come and see Daddy. How did you do that? You know, I went down there and stayed all day, didn't catch anything. And Daddy would share information.
Oh.
You know, like I say, that was before the internet and all that sort of stuff. And his nickname, they called him Chub Chaser. That's a nickname for bass. Anyway. And my mother, in the late 70s, a man gave Daddy a cabin down there that they had built. Him and two other guys had built it in World War II. They were right much older than that. I say after World War II. And so Daddy went down there, him and Mama, they fixed it up really nice. And they used to take Melody and Melissa, my two oldest daughters, and go down there and spend weekends. Daddy could go fishing in Salmon Creek, That was really, really nice. I went down there a few times
There's
myself.
no running water though.
Huh?
There's no running water.
No, they would carry water with them. They had a portable toilet and they'd take water with them, and it was, you know, for what they had and where it was located, that was no hardship.
Yeah.
It was great, you know. But until a great big old tree fell on it in a hurricane during the 90s. That was a great big, I mean, that was just a great place to go. A lot of fun. Not like going out on that creek with that boat and everything, you know, and catching fish and
Mhm.
just hanging out, especially little children when they catch fish. That's a lot of fun.
Except for when you think you're supposed to kiss them and throw them back.
Oh yeah, everything you can imagine. And then there was, you know, a lot of history down there too. Eatonton's a great place. You know,
Mhm.
Blackbeard the pirate and all that sort of stuff from back in the day. My dad knew all about that stuff. You know. So, is there anything else I can tell you?